Welcome back, Canton McKinley High School students, to our workshop today on Plato. We're going to dive a little bit deeper into the course today on this quick workshop, specifically talking about Plato and his allegory of the cave. And we're going to talk about some additional foundational and historical context to add to what you have already learned in this course already so far. So, what we're going to start off with is we're going to really dive into examining Plato's educational philosophy, as previously mentioned, through his allegory of the cave. We're going to focus on his idealistic approach on education and its modern implications. We're going to also explore some of his abstract ideas like freedom and justice, and how they can advance society through education. And then, last but not least, we're going to emphasize some teacher student relationship and the role of educators as the freed prisoners who return to help others achieve enlightenment. So, Plato was, as you guys have previously learned a little bit, as an ancient Greek philosopher, and he holds immense historical significance as a foundational figure in Western thought. He was a student of Socrates and the teacher of Aristotle, which is very interesting. We won't get a lot into this, but Plato and Aristotle actually had pretty different educational and philosophies. For example, Plato was very idealistic, and he thought abstract ideas needed to be learned. So we needed to learn what we did not know or what we cannot see. And in relation to that, Aristotle was very realistic in his educational ideas. He believed in learning from books and learning for what we could see and what we could observe. So, student-teacher relationship here, while they were not necessarily at odds, they definitely had different educational philosophies. So, as previously mentioned, Socrates was the student, Aristotle was the teacher, and their philosophical contributions have profoundly influenced various fields, including politics, metaphysics, and epistemology. So, Plato's writings, particularly the dialogues, are seminal works that explore foundational questions about justice, truth, and the nature of reality. Plato also founded the Academy, which was widely considered the first Western university, which played a crucial role in the development of higher learning. Some of Plato's key philosophical beliefs included abstract ideas are as real as physical objects. So, as I mentioned, the physicalness is closely related to Aristotle, where the abstract is closely related to Plato. But Plato felt like these ideas were as important as the physical ones that we could observe. Education should focus on universal truths. Freedom and justice are essential to teaching concepts. And we'll see this theme throughout this quick workshop where Plato believed that learning the abstract ideas and learning the things that we could not see were important to push along society, to make society a better place as a whole. And then also, one of the foundational core beliefs is that knowledge extends beyond observable phenomenon, which is the big difference again between him and Aristotle. Learning beyond the books, if you will. But there were some educational paradoxes. For example, knowledge inquiry. Plato's belief that all individuals should seek knowledge about unknown subjects. A critical issue, though, is that modern teachers do struggle with student motivation and fostering curiosity. But there was some emphasis on observing student willingness to share with others. And another paradox is the teaching philosophy, which explores the challenge of transitioning from ignorance to knowledge or leaving the cave. And we will talk about the allegory of the cave in depth soon. But this is really what we mean by leaving the cave. And that'll make more sense here coming up in the workshop in a few moments. And a key concept, the role of love in teaching and knowing knowledge sharing. So it is foundationally thought that teachers teach out of love and they free or remove the shackles of those enslaved individuals or the ignorance of those individuals. But there's some also risks and challenges to returning to helping others, right? You could get stuck in the cave, or quite simply, when you're trying to free those from the cave, there are people that they get comfortable with that pain, right? It's a known thing to them. So you could go in there and try to free folks, but they may not necessarily want to be freed of their shackles quite yet. All right. And then, as I mentioned before, that it gets to be that comfortable ignorance, if you will. So more on the teacher-student dynamic. There's a strong connection between learner and teacher, and that is required in that relationship. Think of teachers, Plato thought of teachers as more of a guide from lightness or from darkness to light, where we were in that cave and we could not see outside or behind us. And teachers come in and they remove us from that darkness and they show us the light. They broaden our horizons. They show us that learning is capable and there are things outside of that cave that are worthwhile, or those abstract ideas. And then the importance of distinguishing truth from falsehood, which again, the shadows could be represented as falsehood, where the sun outside of the cave could be known as the truth or the light. And then again, this common thing of illumination in knowledge acquisition. And we'll see some things there about references to sun and light. And then we'll talk a little bit about that in relation to classroom setup. But some cardinal virtues before we move forward with the next slide here is that some of the foundational was wisdom, bravery, temperance, and justice. So more of those abstract ideas, which were so critical to Plato's educational idealist. So let's talk a little bit about knowledge and truth. And as previously mentioned, the sun symbolizes the unity between knowledge and truth. And then we'll discuss the ability to distinguish between knowledge and falsehoods. And then we're going to highlight the development gap between liberated and enslaved individuals. Remember, those liberated individuals are the ones where are removed of the shackles and the ignorance is removed from them. And the enslaved are the individuals that are still in the cave that have gotten comfortable with being enslaved and they don't know what they don't know. So they're comfortable with the known. So, other environmental implications here is that we explore the metaphorical significance of light and darkness, and we'll continue to do so. And then some practical application. So we're going to advocate for a well-lit classroom. If you think of a classroom dynamic, how many classrooms have you been in where there's no sunlight, there's no ability, and it's maybe a dimly lighted room? It's not great for the learning environment, right? How many classes have you had where you've been able to go outside and be in the sunlight? So that is a dynamic of the classroom as well, as being able to have a well-lit, sunlit preferably. All right. And then other limitations and implications is that we focus primarily on the theoretical interpretations, limited discussion of practical modern applications, and it does not address the technological aspects of modern education. So, more on the cave. So, as mentioned, the physical setup, prisoners are chained in the cave, unable to turn their heads, with the fire burning behind prisoners. All right. And then between the fires and the prisoners, the puppeteers walking along the parapet. Shadows cast their shadow on the wall, and the prisoners can only see those shadows, or the real objects remain unseen, or what's outside of the caves. And the echoes and shadows constitute prisoners' reality. So, central arguments. Primary confusion. Prisoners use words to describe shadows. They believe words refer to shadows they see, and actually referring to unseen real objects. And then truth versus appearance. Physical objects are not true reference of language. Forms are actual reference, graspable only by the mind. Perpetual experience leads to conceptual understanding. So to wrap up, Plato's idealistic ideals are still debatable today, and we see it by the choices society chooses to educate their students. For example, why do some enroll students into public schools over magnet or private schools? Why is Common Core debated? And why do some choose higher education? These are all themes to Plato, and some of those include education, symbolism, and knowledge. Educational themes include student motivation and their teacher relationship. As mentioned, the teachers are the ones that have left the cave and returned to break the chains of oppression, and that love motivates those teachers and therefore face the challenges of convincing others to see those unseen truths. Symbolism is common as well because Plato explains how light is truth and how the sun represents knowledge. The symbolism of shadow represents our ignorance, and after being liberated, we begin and gain truth and therefore freedom and justice. Teachers deliver the truth, being the last theme of the dynamic of them confronting fear and coming to the light and breaking free of the shackles of ignorance. And the teachers are the conduit of knowledge, and because of them, we are better as a society. This was, after all, one of the key ideals of Plato. Thank you for coming to the workshop, and we will talk certainly much more about Plato in the upcoming classes. Thank you for your time and attention.